There's a specific moment I keep coming back to. Somewhere on I-70, past the Indiana border, right around the time the sun started going orange. She'd taken her shoes off. Feet on the dashboard. She was reading something on her phone and laughing quietly to herself. And I thought, I don't know this woman at all. She lives 14 feet above my ceiling. I've waved at her in the hallway maybe 60 times. And I don't even know her last name. But I wanted to. And that scared me more than anything had in a long time. I need to back up. 5 in the morning, late June. The parking lot behind the Greystone apartment smelled like wet asphalt and cut grass. I was loading the last of my gear into Leo's truck. Cooler, duffel bag, a box of granola bars I'd bought the night before because I kept forgetting to eat on long drives. The truck was a white Ford F-250, older than most of the tenants in the building, and it ran on faith and regular oil changes. Leo had lent it to me for the week because my Civic couldn't haul the mower trailer. He was 3 states away in Columbus, and I needed to pick up a commercial mower his brother-in-law was selling for cheap. My name is Jake Calloway. I'm 33, and I run a landscaping business by myself. 1 truck, 1 mower, 1 blower, 1 guy who quotes jobs too low because he doesn't like talking to people long enough to negotiate. I moved into Greystone 18 months ago. Apartment 2B, ground floor, south-facing, too much sun in the afternoons. Before that, I lived in a house on Birch Lane with my ex-wife, Dana. We were married for 4 years and divorced for a year and a half. The house went to her. I got the Civic and a savings account that looked like a college student's. The divorce wasn't loud. That's what people don't understand. They picture thrown plates and slammed doors, but ours was quieter than that. We just ran out of things to say. I'd come home from a job covered in dirt, and she'd be on the couch with her laptop, and we'd sit in the same room for 3 hours without speaking. Not angry silence. Just nothing. The absence of any reason to open your mouth. She asked me to leave on a Tuesday. I remember because I had a mulch delivery scheduled for Wednesday, and I spent the night in my truck outside a Home Depot trying to figure out whether I should cancel it. I didn't cancel it. The next morning I delivered the mulch, quoted 2 new jobs, and found the apartment listing on my phone during lunch. That's how I handle things. I keep moving until my hands are too sore to think about anything else. I mow lawns and edge sidewalks and pull weeds out of beds that nobody cares about, and I do it 7 days a week if the weather holds. Greystone was fine. Clean building, quiet neighbors, a laundry room in the basement that smelled like dryer sheets and mild regret. My apartment had 1 bedroom, a kitchen with a stove I rarely used, and a living room where I kept a couch, a TV, and nothing on the walls. My sister saw it once and said it looked like a safe house. She wasn't wrong. The upstairs neighbor moved in about 2 years ago. Apartment 3B. I heard the movers' first heavy footsteps and furniture scraping across the floor, then a muffled apology through the ceiling. After that it got quiet. And then, over the next few weeks, I started noticing her. Marin. I didn't learn her name for 3 months. She was just the woman upstairs. The one who came and went at odd hours. I'd hear her footsteps above my ceiling at 2 in the morning, soft but deliberate, like she was pacing. Then nothing for days. Then the pacing again. We passed each other in the hallway maybe twice a week. She'd nod and I'd nod. Sometimes she was carrying a canvas bag of groceries. Sometimes she had headphones in and didn't see me at all. She was maybe 30. Brown hair, usually pulled back. She wore the same gray jacket in 3 different seasons, like it was the only one she owned. I didn't think about her. That's not true. I noticed her. But I didn't let myself think about her, which is a different thing, and if you've been through a divorce, you know the difference. You notice someone, and then you put a wall up so fast you almost forget you noticed. Because noticing leads to interest, and interest leads to vulnerability, and vulnerability is the thing that got you living in a 1-bedroom apartment with nothing on the walls. So I nodded. She nodded. And that was it for 2 years. Until the stairwell. The night before the trip, I was hauling my cooler down from the 2nd floor. The elevator in Greystone had been broken since April, and management kept promising a repair that never came. The stairwell smelled like paint and someone's leftover Thai food. I was rounding the landing between the second and third floors when the door opened and Maren came through. She was holding a mug. Not a travel mug. A real ceramic mug, like she'd just walked out of her kitchen mid-sip. She looked at me, then at the cooler, then at the duffel bag over my shoulder. "Going somewhere," she said. "Columbus," I said. "I'm picking up a mower for my business." She nodded, like that was a perfectly normal thing to say at 10 at night in a stairwell. "Long drive," she said. "About 7 or 8 hours depending on stops." "I'm leaving early." She took a sip of whatever was in the mug. I could smell it from where I stood. Something herbal, not coffee. And then I said it. I don't know why I said it. I think I was tired, and when I'm tired I get stupid, and when I get stupid I say things I'd never say with a full night's sleep. "You should come," I said. "Road trip." "I've got the whole truck." I said it the way you say things you don't mean. Loose and light, the kind of offer that dissolves before it hits the ground. She looked at me for about 2 seconds. Maybe 3. Long enough that I started to feel the weight of what I'd just said. "Okay," she said. Just the word, flat, no smile, no question mark. Like she was confirming a dentist appointment. I laughed. She didn't. I said I was kidding. She said, "I know." But okay. Then she walked back through the door, and I heard her footsteps going up the stairs above me. The same soft, deliberate steps I'd been hearing through my ceiling for 2 years. I stood there holding the cooler for probably 10 seconds too long. Then I went downstairs and loaded the truck and told myself she wasn't serious. She wasn't serious. People don't say okay to a stranger's road trip invitation at 10 at night and then show up at 5 in the morning. That's not how people work. That's not how Maren worked. Maren was the not in the hallway woman. Maren was footsteps above my ceiling and a gray jacket in 3 seasons. Not serious. I finished packing and went to bed. Set my alarm for 4:30. Lay there staring at the ceiling, which was also her floor, and listened for footsteps. Nothing. See, not serious. I woke up before the alarm. Showered, pulled on jeans and a t-shirt, grabbed my phone and my wallet and the bag of granola bars. Went outside to do one final check on the truck. I walked around it twice, checking tires, oil level, hitch connection. The trailer was already hooked up, empty, ready for the mower. The parking lot was still dark. The streetlight on the corner of Greystone flickered the way it always did, like it was trying to decide whether to commit. I could hear birds starting up somewhere behind the building and the low hum of the interstate 2 miles east. I was checking the trailer lights when I heard the front door of the building open. I looked up. Maren was standing on the front step. She had a small duffel bag over one shoulder and a thermos in her hand. She was wearing jeans and a sweatshirt I'd never seen before, dark green, too big for her. Her hair was down, which I'd never seen either. It was longer than I thought. She walked across the parking lot toward the truck. Didn't rush, didn't hesitate. Just walked, like this was something she did every morning. Like 5 a.m. Truck arrivals were part of her routine. She stopped about 6 feet from me and held up the thermos. "I made coffee," she said. "I didn't know how you take it, so it's black." I stared at her. I'm sure my face was doing something ridiculous. Surprise probably, and confusion. The kind of expression that makes you wish you'd prepared a response for a situation you were sure would never happen. "You're here," I said. "You invited me." I was kidding. She shrugged with one shoulder. "You said Columbus, 7 hours." "I've never been to Columbus." I didn't say anything for a second. There was a version of this where I told her no. Where I said I appreciate it, but I'm going alone. This is a work trip, I don't really know you. This doesn't make sense. That version was reasonable. That version was safe. I opened the passenger door. She climbed in. Set the thermos in the cup holder. Put her bag on the floor between her feet and looked straight ahead through the windshield, like she'd been sitting in this truck her whole life. I walked around to the driver's side and got in. Adjusted the mirror for no reason. Put the key in the ignition. The engine turned over on the second try. Leo's truck always needed two. I pulled out of the parking lot and turned east toward the interstate. The sky was that gray-blue color it gets before sunrise, when the world looks like hasn't decided what kind of day to be yet. Neither of us said anything for the first 7 minutes. I counted. Not on purpose. I just noticed the clock on the dash when we pulled out, and I noticed it again when she finally spoke. "You don't have to talk to me," she said. "I brought a book." She held up her phone. I didn't ask what she was reading. We merged onto I-70. The road was empty enough that the headlights felt unnecessary, but I left them on. The trailer rattled behind us, hollow and loud in the quiet cab. My phone buzzed in the cup holder. I glanced at the screen. Leo. I picked up on speaker because I was driving, and because I'd forgotten that Maren was in the truck, which sounds impossible given that she was 3 feet away from me, but my brain hadn't caught up yet. "Jake," Leo said. His voice filled the cab like he was sitting in the back seat. Leo talks at a volume that suggests he's never been in a room that was small enough for his voice. "You on the road yet?" "Yeah. Pulled out about 20 minutes ago." "Good. Claire's making brisket when you get here. You want cornbread or rolls?" I glanced at Maren. She was looking out the window. If she was listening, she didn't show it. "Rolls," I said. "Thanks, man." "You remember where the house is?" "I've been there 4 times, Leo." "I know, and you still got lost the last 2. Claire says to use the GPS this time. She's tired of giving directions over the phone while the food gets cold." I could hear Claire's voice in the background, distant, saying something I couldn't make out. Leo laughed at whatever it was. The kind of laugh that comes from 20 years of inside jokes. The kind you can't fake. "I'll figure it out," I said. "All right. Drive safe. Call me when you're past Indianapolis." He hung up. The cab went quiet again. Just the engine and the trailer and the sound of tires on pavement. Maren looked over at me. "Leo," she said. Not a question. Just the name, like she was filing it away somewhere. "Friend of mine," I said. "It's his truck." She nodded and looked back out the window. "He sounds loud," she said. "He is." That was the end of it. She went back to her phone and I went back to the road. The sun wasn't up yet, but the sky was starting to lighten along the edge of the horizon, pink and thin, like something too fragile to look at directly. I had a plan for this trip. Leave at 5, drive 7 hours, pick up the mower, stay 1 night at Leo's, drive back the next day. Simple and clean, the kind of plan that doesn't leave room for surprises. Maren was not part of the plan. She was sitting in the passenger seat of a truck that wasn't mine, drinking coffee she'd made at 4 in the morning, reading something on her phone with her knees pulled up to her chest. And I had no idea what her last name was, or what she did for a living, or why she'd said okay to a stranger's throwaway joke in a stairwell that smelled like old paint. But she was here. And the road was long. And for the first time in 18 months, the seat next to me wasn't empty. I didn't know what to do with that. So, I drove. The first hour was the worst. Not bad, just thick. The kind of silence that has weight to it, where you can feel the other person choosing not to speak, and you're choosing not to speak, and both of you know that the other one is choosing, and the choosing itself becomes louder than anything either of you could say. I kept my hands at 10 and 2. Watched the mile markers in the sky getting brighter in stages, gray to pink to pale yellow. The trailer rattled behind us like a tin can on a string. Maren had her knees up again, phone in one hand. She hadn't looked at me since the Leo call, and I hadn't looked at her except in the corner of my eye, which doesn't count. Or maybe it counts more. I've never been good at the rules of looking. Somewhere past Richmond, Indiana, she reached for the radio. She didn't ask. Just turned it on. The dial was set to a country station Leo must have programmed, because I don't listen to country, and I don't think Maren does either. A man was singing about a truck and a girl and a Friday night, which felt too on the nose for what was happening. She turned the dial and got static, then more static, Then a morning talk show where two people were laughing about something that wasn't funny. She landed on a station playing something with a piano. Soft, no lyrics. She left it there and looked out the window. The piano filled the cab like a third person. Not awkward, not comfortable, just present. I turned it down one notch. She turned it up half a notch. Neither of us said anything about it. That's how the first 90 minutes went. Piano music and mile markers and the smell of her coffee going cold in the thermos. We stopped for gas outside Dayton. I filled the tank while she went inside the station. She came back with 2 paper cups of coffee from the machine, the kind that tastes like someone described coffee to a person who'd never had it, and they did their best. She handed me one, and I took it with both hands. "Thanks," I said. "It's terrible," she said. "I tasted it before I bought yours." She was right. It was terrible. I drank it anyway because she'd bought it, and because my hands needed something to hold. We stood in the parking lot for a minute. The sun was fully up now, flat and white, and the gas station smelled like diesel and old hot dogs. She squinted at the road ahead like she was calculating something. "You do this a lot," she said. "Long drives." "For work." "Yeah. I pick up equipment, drop off mulch." Once I drove to Pennsylvania for a chipper that turned out to be broken. She almost smiled. The corner of her mouth moved about 2 millimeters, and I noticed because I was watching. I was watching because she was standing in gas station light, drinking bad coffee, and something about the whole picture made my chest feel strange. "What do you do?" I said. I realized I still didn't know. She took a sip and looked at her cup like the answer was in it. "I translate things," she said. "Like languages?" "Books, documents, legal stuff sometimes. French and German mostly, and some Italian." I didn't know what to say to that. I'd spent 2 years living below a woman who spoke 4 languages and I hadn't known. I'd been nodding at her in the hallway while she was upstairs, turning one language into another, and I was downstairs trying to keep a lawnmower running. "That's why you're up at 2 in the morning," I said. She looked at me. "I hear you walking around," I said. "Through the ceiling." Something crossed her face, not embarrassment, but something closer to surprise, like she'd forgotten that floors work in both directions. "I pace when I'm stuck on a word," she said. "Sorry about that." "Don't be sorry. I liked it, knowing someone was up there." That came out wrong. Or maybe it came out right. I don't know. She looked at me for a second longer than felt normal, then got back in the truck. We pulled back onto the highway. The bad coffee sat between us in the cup holders like evidence. I should tell you something about the drive. There's a stretch of I-70 between Dayton and Columbus, where the road is straight and flat, and the fields on either side go all the way to the edge of the sky. It's the kind of landscape where nothing happens. Where you could drive for 40 minutes and see nothing but corn and telephone poles, and the same cloud sitting in the same spot like it forgot to move. That's where I missed the exit. I don't know how. I've done this drive 4 times. But I was listening to Marin talk about a book she was translating, something about a woman in post-war Lyon who wrote letters to a man she'd never met, and I wasn't paying attention to the signs. She was explaining how the French word for missing someone is the same as the word for being absent, and how that changes the entire meaning of every letter in the book, and I was nodding like I understood when I didn't. Not entirely. But I understood enough to want to keep listening, and that was the problem. By the time I realized we were 20 miles past the exit, I pulled over and checked the GPS on my phone. The detour added about 2 hours through back roads I'd never seen. "I'm sorry," I said. She looked at the GPS, then at me. 2 hours, she said. "Yeah." She leaned back in her seat and pulled her knees up. "I've never been to Ohio," she said. "Show me Ohio." So I did. We took Route 40 through towns I couldn't pronounce, past barns with faded paint and churches with white steeples and a diner called Patty's that looked like it hadn't been renovated since 1974. Marin pointed at it. "We should stop," she said. We stopped. Patty's had 6 booths, a counter with swivel stools, and a waitress named Donna who called everyone on and meant it. The coffee was slightly better than the gas station. The pie was pecan, and it was the best thing I'd eaten in weeks. Marin ordered coffee and a slice, and sat across from me in the booth by the window. The sun was coming through the glass at an angle that made everything look warmer than it was. Or maybe it was warm. I couldn't tell the difference anymore. She wrapped both hands around her mug. Long fingers, no rings. I noticed that, and then I noticed myself noticing it, and I looked away. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Yeah." "Why'd you invite me?" I moved my fork around the plate. "Because I'm an idiot when I'm tired, I told you that." She shook her head. "You said that, but you opened the door." I looked at her. She was watching me with the same expression she'd had in the stairwell. Not blank, just still, like she was waiting for something real. "I don't know," I said. And that was the truth. I didn't know why I opened the door. I didn't know why I'd said, "Come to Columbus." I didn't know why, when she showed up at 5 in the morning with a thermos and a green jacket that was too big for her, I felt something unlock in my chest that I'd spent 18 months keeping shut. The silence lasted about 4 seconds. Then Donna came by and refilled the coffee, and the moment dissolved. After Patty's, we got back in the truck. Marin pulled a laptop out of her bag, which surprised me. She opened it on her knees and started typing. The screen reflected off the passenger window, and I could see fragments of text in a language I didn't recognize. "Is that German?" I said. She nodded without looking up. "Legal contract for a medical device company in Munich." I watched the road while she typed. The clicking of her keys became its own kind of music, mixed with the engine and the gravel shoulders and the wind through the cracked window. Every few minutes she'd stop typing and mouth something silently, just her lips moving without sound, testing a phrase to see how it fit. Then she'd type again. I'd never watched someone work like that before. Not Dana. Dana worked at a laptop too, marketing stuff for a tech company, but she'd always close it when I came in the room. Like her work was a private thing I wasn't supposed to see. Marin worked with the screen facing me, and her lips moving and her fingers pausing and starting, and she didn't seem to care that I was 3 feet away. Or maybe she'd forgotten. She said something in German. Quiet, almost to herself. I didn't understand a word of it. But the sound of it did something. Like hearing a song you don't know the lyrics to, but the melody gets inside you anyway. Sorry, she said. I talk to myself when I'm working. You're fine, I said, and I meant it. My phone rang, and I checked the screen. Leo again. I picked up. Jake, where are you? You should be here by now. Claire's asking. I glanced at Marin. She was looking at her laptop, or pretending to. I missed an exit, I said. Took a detour. I'll be there in about 3 hours. 3 hours? Leo's voice went up a register. What happened? You break down. No, I just missed the turn. I'm on Route 40. Route 40? That's farm country. What are you doing on Route 40? Enjoying the scenery, Leo. There was a pause. Leo's pauses are rare, which makes them noticeable. I could hear Claire saying something in the background again. Jake, Leo said. His voice dropped half a register, which meant he was about to say something he thought was perceptive. Are you alone? I didn't answer right away, which was the wrong move, because Leo has the instincts of a hunting dog when it comes to evasion. Yeah, I said, and he jumped on it immediately. You hesitated for 2 full seconds, he said. Who's with you? Marin was looking at me now. I could see her reflection in the windshield, half of her face and the green of her jacket. Nobody, I said, and I could feel how stupid it sounded. Nobody is with me. Leo started laughing. The deep kind, the kind that starts in his belly and works its way out. I could hear Claire's voice in the background, sharper now, asking what was so funny. Bring her, Leo said. What? Whoever she is, bring her. Claire's making brisket and there's plenty. You know Claire cooks for 12 even when it's just us. I could hear Claire in the background now, clearly. She was saying something about the guest room and clean towels. She'd gone from 0 to hostess in about 4 seconds, which is how Claire operates. Leo once told me that Claire doesn't have a casual mode. She's either asleep or she's preparing a meal for someone who doesn't know they're coming to dinner yet. Leo, I said. There's nobody. 3 hours on farm roads, Leo said. You're not alone. I've known you for 15 years, Jake. You take the fastest route everywhere. You once drove 30 miles out of your way to avoid a traffic light that takes too long. That light is 4 minutes, I said. Bring her, Leo said again. I'll set up the guest room. Claire's already pulling out the good plates. He hung up before I could argue. The cab went quiet and Maren closed her laptop slowly. He seems nice, she said. He's a lot. She looked out the window. The fields were gold now, late afternoon, and the light made everything look softer. Like the whole state was trying too hard to be beautiful. I don't have to come in, she said. When we get there, I can wait in the truck or find a coffee shop. I kept my eyes on the road. My hands tightened on the wheel, not from frustration but from something else. From the fact that she was offering me an exit, and I didn't want to take it. He said to bring you, I said. You told him nobody was with you. I know. She was quiet for a second. Then she said, why? I didn't have a good answer. Because explaining Maren to Leo would mean explaining Maren to myself, and I hadn't done that yet. Because saying my neighbor came along would make Leo ask questions I didn't know the answers to. Because the truth was simpler and more complicated than anything I could fit into a phone call with a man who'd been happily married for 20 years and thought the solution to everything was a brisket and clean towels. Because I don't know what this is, I said. She nodded. Like that was an acceptable answer. Like that was exactly the answer she'd expected. We drove the last hour in a different kind of quiet. Not the thick silence from the morning, and not the careful distance of two strangers sharing a cab. This was softer. The kind of silence where you don't talk because you don't need to, where the absence of words isn't empty but full. She put her laptop away and watched the road. I watched the road. The fields turned from gold to amber to that deep orange that only happens in the last half hour before the sun gives up. And somewhere between a town called Zanesville and the outskirts of Columbus, she reached over and turned the radio back on. Found the piano station and turned it up one notch. I didn't turn it down. Leo's house looked like him. Loud, a little too much, warm in a way you couldn't argue with. Two-story colonial on a cul-de-sac with a flag on the porch and a garden out front that somebody actually maintained. I could tell by the mulch. Fresh cedar laid thick, edges clean against the brick border. Somebody cared about that garden. I pulled the truck into the driveway next to a silver minivan and killed the engine. The white F-250 ticked in the evening air. Behind us, the trailer sat empty and patient. Maren hadn't moved. She was looking at the house through the windshield with an expression I couldn't read. Not nervous. More like she was cataloging the place, filing it somewhere in that quiet brain of hers. The front door opened before I could say anything. Leo came down the porch steps in bare feet, khaki shorts, a barbecue apron that said something I couldn't read from the truck. He was bigger than you'd expect from his voice, and his voice already suggested a large man. 6'2", wide through the shoulders, a beard he'd been growing since before beards were a personality trait. Jake Calloway, he said, arms out like I'd been gone for years instead of 4 months. He pulled me into a hug that cracked something in my upper back. Then he stepped away and looked past me at the truck. At Maren. She'd gotten out on her side and was standing by the passenger door with her bag over one shoulder and her thermos in the other hand. The green jacket, her hair still down. Leo looked at me, then at her, then back at me with a grin spreading across his face. Nobody, huh? He said. Leo. Nobody with the thermos and the overnight bag. Leo, this is Maren. She's my neighbor, and she came along for the ride. Leo walked around the truck and offered Maren his hand. He shook it the way Leo shakes everything, like he was trying to communicate through grip strength alone. Maren, he said. I'm Leo. My wife Claire is inside pulling out the good plates, which means she already knows you're here, which means there's no point in Jake pretending you don't exist. Maren looked at me. The corner of her mouth moved. He talks about you the same way he talks, she said to Leo. Leo laughed so loud a dog barked 2 houses down. Claire appeared in the doorway. She was shorter than Leo by about a foot, dark hair pinned up, reading glasses pushed onto the top of her head. She had a dish towel over one shoulder, and she was already smiling at Marin like they'd met before. "Come in," she said. "Both of you." Brisket's resting and I made rolls, because apparently someone has opinions. She meant me. I'd told Leo rolls. Claire hugged me at the door, quick and tight. Then she looked at Marin and her smile changed. Got softer. The kind of smile women give each other when they're deciding whether to trust someone, which is a different process than how men do it. Faster. More accurate. "You must be tired," Claire said to Marin. 7 hours in a truck with Jake and no air conditioning. "The truck has air conditioning," I said. "It hasn't worked since 2019, Claire said without looking at me. She was right. I'd had the windows cracked the whole drive and hadn't mentioned it. Claire led Marin inside and I heard their voices moving through the house getting farther. Something about the guest room, something about towels, something I couldn't make out that made Marin say a word in what sounded like German, and Claire laughed. I stood on the porch with Leo. The evening was warm and the street was quiet, and somewhere in the cul-de-sac a sprinkler was running on a timer. Leo crossed his arms and leaned against the railing. "So," he said, and let the word hang there between us. I didn't take the bait. He just stood there with his arms crossed, and that expression on his face, the one he gets when he's already decided what he thinks, and he's waiting for you to catch up. "She's my neighbor," I said. "You said that." "From the building, apartment 3B, she lives right above me." "I heard you the first time." I shifted my weight from one foot to the other. The sprinkler clicked through its cycle somewhere in the dark. "It's not what you think," I said. "I don't think anything. I'm just standing here." "You're standing there with a face." "I have a face, yeah. I've had it for 46 years. You know what I mean." Leo uncrossed his arms and sat down on the porch steps. He patted the spot next to him the way you'd call a dog over, and I sat down because I've been sitting when Leo tells me to sit for 15 years. The streetlight at the end of the cul-de-sac was the same flickering kind as the one at Greystone. I stared at it because it was easier than looking at Leo. "You drove 7 hours with her," Leo said. 8.5, because I missed the exit. Leo made a sound, not quite a laugh, something between a cough and a confirmation. Like the missed exit told him everything he needed to know. "Jake," he said. And then nothing for a second. When Leo pauses, it feels like weather, like something building on the horizon. "Yeah. When's the last time you did something that didn't make sense?" I looked at him. "When's the last time you did something you couldn't explain to yourself? Something where you just did it and figured out why later?" I thought about it and couldn't come up with an answer. If this story is landing with you, consider subscribing. The channel has more like it, and your support means everything. "That's the problem," Leo said. "You've been making sense for a year and a half. You've been running your little business and mowing your little lawns and going home to your little apartment and making perfect sense every single day. And you're miserable." "I'm not miserable. You drove on Route 40 for 2 extra hours through farm country. You're having dinner at my house with a woman you didn't tell me about. You invited a stranger on a road trip because you were tired and your mouth got ahead of your brain." Leo leaned back on his hands. "That's not a guy who's fine. That's a guy who's so hungry for something to not make sense that he'll blow up his own schedule to feel alive for 8 hours. I didn't say anything because I didn't have anything to say. Or I had too much to say and none of it was organized enough to come out." "She seems good," Leo said. "You've known her for 90 seconds. I've known you for 15 years. That's long enough to see what 90 seconds with the right person does to your face." I pressed my palms against the concrete step. It was still warm from the day. "I don't know what I'm doing," I said. Leo put his hand on my shoulder, heavy and warm, and held it there. "Good," he said. "That's the first honest thing you've said all day." We sat there for a while. Claire's voice came through the screen door, and Marin's voice under it, quieter, and the sound of something being set on a table. Silverware maybe, or glasses. Leo told me about the mower. His brother-in-law had it in the garage, serviced and ready. We could load it in the morning, hook up the trailer, be back on the road by 10. The mower. The reason for the trip. The thing that was supposed to be the whole point. I'd nearly forgotten about it. Dinner was brisket and rolls, and a salad Claire made with something she grew in the garden out front. We ate at the dining room table, which had 4 chairs and 4 place settings, like they'd been expecting all of us the whole time. Leo sat at the head. Claire sat across from me, and Marin sat to my right, close enough that when she reached for the rolls, her sleeve brushed my arm. Leo talked. Leo always talked. He told a story about a fishing trip where he fell out of the boat and lost his phone. He told a story about the time Claire locked her keys in the car at a grocery store, and a 12-year-old picked the lock in 30 seconds. He talked with his hands, and his voice filled the room the way it filled the truck cab, like a thing that occupied physical space. But between the stories, in the gaps where Leo took a breath or reached for his glass, I watched him look at Claire. Not stare, not gaze, just look. The way you look at something you've been looking at for 20 years and still find worth looking at. She'd say something about the garden, or the neighbors, or the leaking faucet in the upstairs bathroom, and he'd turn toward her with his whole body. Not just his head. His shoulders, his chest, everything. Like she was magnetic, and he couldn't help it and didn't want to. And Claire would catch him looking and not react at all. She'd just keep talking, mid-sentence, and her hand would find his forearm on the table and rest there for a second, and then she'd pull it back and ask Marin about the translations. 20 years of that. 20 years of looking at someone across a table and meaning it. I picked at my brisket and tried not to think about the 4 years I'd spent across a table from Dana, where the looking had stopped somewhere around year 2. After dinner, Claire took Marin upstairs to show her the guest room. Leo and I did dishes. He washed and I dried, and the kitchen smelled like soap and leftover brisket and the faint green scent of whatever Claire was growing in the window box. I heard them upstairs. Claire's voice through the ceiling and Marin's underneath it. The same configuration as my apartment. Someone above me, walking and talking, and me down here listening. Leo, I said, what did Claire tell Marin up there? Did she mention what they talked about? Leo handed me a plate and didn't look at me. Claire said your neighbor asked what you were like before the divorce. And Claire told her you were the same, except you used to laugh louder. I dried the plate and set it on the stack. Claire told her something else too, Leo said. She told her that the first time she met me, she thought I was the loudest, most obnoxious person she'd ever been in a room with. And that the second time she met me, she thought the same thing. And the third time too. But by the fourth time, she realized the noise was just how I kept people from getting too close. And that underneath it I was the most scared person she'd ever met. Leo turned off the water and dried his hands on the apron. I'm telling you this because Claire sees things, he said. And Claire told Marin that you remind her of me before I stopped being scared. Same walls, different material. The kitchen was quiet except for the clock above the stove. One of those old analog ones with a second hand that ticked loud enough to count. I leaned against the counter and looked at the stack of clean plates. 4 plates, 4 settings, like this was a normal evening. Like this was what life looked like when you stopped running from it. Leo hung the dish towel on the oven handle and turned to me. The mower's in the garage, he said. We'll load it at 8. You'll be on the road by 10. And then you'll be back in that apartment with that woman 14 feet above your ceiling, and you'll go right back to nodding at each other in the hallway unless you decide not to. He said it the way Leo says everything. Loud, direct, without apology. I went upstairs and stood in the hallway outside the guest room. The door was open a crack and the light was off. I could hear Marin's breathing, slow and steady, already asleep or getting close. I stood there for a long time. Long enough that the hallway felt like the stairwell at Greystone. Long enough that I could hear the same kind of silence, the kind that isn't empty, the kind that's asking you a question. I went to the couch in Leo's living room and lay there in the dark. The ceiling above me was someone else's ceiling, not Marin's floor. And for the first time, the absence of her footsteps felt like something missing instead of something I'd gotten used to. The mower was in the garage. The trailer was in the driveway. By 10 in the morning, the whole excuse for this trip would be loaded and tied down and finished. The drive home was 8 hours. Less if I took the interstate, less if I didn't miss any exits, less if I drove the way I always drove, fast and efficient and making perfect sense. I didn't want to make sense. Leo was right about that. I'd been making sense for 18 months and it had gotten me a clean apartment with nothing on the walls. And a business I ran alone and a neighbor I'd been waving at for 2 years when I should have been knocking on her door. I closed my eyes. The house settled around me, and somewhere upstairs a floorboard creaked. One creak, soft and deliberate. She was awake too. I didn't go up. But I didn't close my eyes again either. I lay on Leo's couch and listened to the silence and let myself want something without immediately talking myself out of it. Which doesn't sound like much. But for me, at that point, it was everything. Leo woke me up at 7:30 by dropping a coffee mug on the kitchen counter hard enough to rattle the cabinets. I don't think it was on purpose. Leo just doesn't know how to do anything quietly. I sat up on the couch and stared at the ceiling. Light was coming through the front windows in long, flat bars across the carpet. My neck hurt from sleeping at an angle, and my mouth tasted like the inside of a glove. "Morning," Leo said from the kitchen. He was wearing the same apron from last night, which meant either he'd been cooking already or he'd never taken it off. Both seemed equally possible. "Claire's making eggs," he said. "You want cheese in yours?" I stood up and rubbed my face with both hands. My phone was on the coffee table, screen dark. No messages. "Where's Marin?" I said. Leo pointed at the ceiling with his spatula. "Guest room." "She's been up for an hour. Claire heard her walking around at 6. Walking around. Pacing. The same thing she did at 2 in the morning in apartment 3B when she was stuck on a word. The same sound through the same kind of ceiling, 300 miles from home. I went to the bathroom and washed my face. The mirror was the kind with a thick oak frame that made you look like a portrait of yourself. I looked tired. Not bad tired, just different tired. Like I'd slept enough, but the part of me that needed rest wasn't the part that sleeps. Breakfast was eggs and toast and sliced fruit that Claire had arranged on a plate like it was a restaurant. The 4 of us sat at the same table with the same 4 settings, and Leo talked about the mower and the trailer hitch and how his brother-in-law had replaced the blades last month. Marin ate slowly. She had her hair pulled back again, the way it usually was at Greystone. The green jacket was over the back of her chair. She listened to Leo and nodded in the right places, and her eyes moved to mine once, twice, and a third time that lasted half a second longer than the first 2. I looked away every time, and every time I felt the looking land somewhere in my chest before I could stop it. After breakfast, Leo and I loaded the mower. His brother-in-law had left it in the garage, a 48-inch commercial zero-turn that weighed more than it looked. We got it up the ramp and onto the trailer and strapped it down while the sun came up hot through the open garage door. Leo handed me a ratchet strap and leaned against the truck bed. "You sleep at all?" he said. "Some." He didn't push it. He just stood there in the garage light with his arms crossed, watching me check the straps. Then he said something without looking at me. "You make sense, Jake, and that's the problem. You always have." I pulled the strap tight and hooked it. "You said that last night," I said. "I'm saying it again. Because you're going to drive home today, and you're going to sit 3 feet from that woman for 8 hours, and you're going to make sense the whole way. You're going to be polite. You're going to be careful. You're going to drop her off at the apartment and go back inside your place and sit on your couch and listen to her walk around above you for the next 2 years." I looked at him. He wasn't smiling. "Don't do that," he said. The truck was loaded by 9. Claire came out to the driveway with a paper bag she said had sandwiches and 2 bottles of water and a note she'd written for Marin, which she tucked into the side pocket of Marin's bag when she thought nobody was looking. Leo and I both saw it, and Marin didn't, and Claire pretended it hadn't happened. Claire hugged me first, then Marin. She held Marin for a beat longer than she held me, and she said something into her ear that I couldn't hear. Marin's hand tightened on Claire's arm, and she nodded once without pulling away. Leo shook my hand, then pulled me into a hug that felt like a structural test. "Call me when you get home," he said. "I will." "I mean it, Jake. Don't text, call. I want to hear your voice when you tell me how it went." I didn't ask what he meant by that. I knew what he meant. We pulled out of the cul-de-sac at 9:40. The mower sat heavy on the trailer behind us, and the truck rode lower than it had on the way out. The garage door was closing in the rearview mirror, and Leo and Claire were standing on the porch, his arm around her shoulders, her hand resting on his chest. I took the interstate this time. No Route 40, no back roads, no diners with pecan pie. The GPS said 7 hours and 42 minutes, and I intended to make every one of them count. Marin sat in the passenger seat. Same posture as the morning we left, knees up, bag on the floor, phone in her lap. But something was different. She wasn't cold, and she wasn't distant, just careful, like she was carrying something fragile and trying not to jostle it. We didn't talk for the first hour. The radio was off. Just the engine and the trailer and the wind through the cracked window and the mower making a dull metal sound every time we hit a seam in the highway. I kept thinking about what Leo said in the garage. About making sense. About 2 years of walking past someone who was right there. Somewhere around the Indiana border I pulled off at a rest stop. Not because I needed gas or a bathroom, but because the truck cab felt too small and too big at the same time, and if I didn't get out of the seat I was going to say something I wasn't ready to say while going 70 on the interstate. The rest stop had a bench under a maple tree near the edge of the parking lot. I sat down. The wood was warm from the sun. I could see the truck from where I sat, the trailer, the mower strapped down under the blue ratchet straps. Marin got out. She walked across the lot and stood near the bench without sitting down. She had her arms crossed, not defensive, more like she was holding herself together. She looked at the tree and then at me and then at the tree again. "Can I sit?" she said. "It's a public bench." She sat. About 2 feet of space between us. The maple tree threw shadows across both of us in the same pattern. I stared at the truck. The white F-250, with the trailer and the mower and the reason this trip existed. The excuse. The thing I'd told myself this was about. "I heard you," Marin said. I looked at her. She was looking at her hands. "Last night," she said. "At dinner. When Leo asked why you didn't tell him about me. You said, because I don't know what this is." I remembered. I remembered saying it on the phone, on Route 40, with her reflection in the windshield. "Yeah," I said. She pulled at a thread on the hem of her sleeve. Slow, deliberate, the way she paced at 2 in the morning. "I said okay in the stairwell because I wanted you to ask me," she said. Her voice was low, not quiet but low, like she was pulling the words up from somewhere deep. "I've been in that apartment for 2 years," she said. "I moved there after a contract ended in Hamburg, and I didn't know where else to go. I picked the building because it was cheap and quiet, and I thought quiet was what I needed." She stopped pulling at the thread. "And then I kept hearing you. Below me. Your door closing in the morning. Your truck starting in the parking lot. The sound of you coming up the stairs at night, always the same time, always the same pace. And I'd be sitting at my desk at 2 in the morning translating a legal filing about patent law in Munich, and I'd hear you moving around down there, and I'd think, he's awake too." She looked at me. Her eyes were steady and her jaw was tight, like she was holding the words in place by force. "You joked about the road trip. I know you were joking. But when you said it, I thought, if I don't say yes right now, I'll go back upstairs and listen to him through the floor for another 2 years, and never know what his voice sounds like when he's not being careful." I couldn't look away from her. I tried. My body didn't cooperate. I didn't say anything for a few seconds. Not because I didn't have words. Because the words I had were too simple, and I kept thinking they needed to be more. That the moment required something bigger than what I could offer. But the thing about Leo's speech, and Claire's quiet confidence, and 20 years of looking at someone across a table and meaning it. The thing about all of that is it made me realize that the big moment isn't big. It's the smallest thing you can say if you say it without the padding. I should have knocked on your door, I said. She didn't move. 2 years ago or a year ago or 6 months ago. I should have come upstairs and knocked on your door and said something. Anything. I don't know what I would have said. I didn't have a speech, and I still don't. But I should have knocked. Her hand moved across the bench. Not to mine. Just closer. An inch of warm wood between her fingers and mine. You're knocking now, she said. The maple tree moved in the wind above us, and the shadows shifted across the bench, and I put my hand over hers. Her fingers were cool from the air conditioning in the truck, and they curled around mine. And neither of us said anything for a while. We got back in the truck. She didn't pull her knees up this time. She sat with her feet on the floor and her hands in her lap, and when I started the engine she reached for the radio and found the piano station, and it filled the cab the way it had on the drive out. Like a third person who knew when to stay quiet. I drove. She sat beside me. The mower rattled on the trailer behind us, and the highway stretched flat and long ahead of us, and the sun moved across the sky the way it does when you stop watching it, all at once and without permission. We talked. Not about everything, and not about the future or the past or what this was or what it meant. She told me about Hamburg, about the apartment she'd had there, smaller than 3B, with a window that looked out onto a canal. About the morning she'd packed one suitcase and flown back to the States without telling anyone where she was going. I told her about Dana a little. About the mulch delivery the morning after she asked me to leave. About the walls I hadn't hung anything on because hanging something up felt too permanent for a place I hadn't decided to stay in. She said, "You've been there 18 months. I know. She almost smiled. The same 2 millimeters from the gas station parking lot. The Greystone parking lot looked smaller than I remembered. The streetlight on the corner flickered in its usual indecisive way. I pulled the truck into the same spot I'd left from 2 days ago and killed the engine. The building sat there, brown brick, 4 stories, the broken elevator, and the stairwell that smelled like paint. My apartment on the 2nd floor, hers on the 3rd, 14 feet of floor and ceiling between us. We sat in the truck for a minute. The engine ticked. The mower cooled on the trailer behind us. The parking lot was empty except for my Civic, which was right where I'd left it, dusty and patient. My phone buzzed and I looked at the screen. Leo. Not a call but a text, just one line. Stop making sense. I put the phone back in the cup holder and looked at Marin. She was looking at the building the same way she'd looked at Leo's house when we pulled in. Cataloging. Filing. I should go up, she said. Yeah. She picked up her bag from the floor. Slung it over her shoulder. She looked at me, and her hand went to the door handle and stopped. Thank you for the trip, she said. And the pie. And the terrible gas station coffee. Any time, I said, and I meant it differently than I'd ever meant it before. She got out. She walked across the parking lot and into the building, and I watched her go. The front door closed behind her, and I sat in Leo's truck in the parking lot for 3 full minutes doing nothing. Then I got out, unhooked the trailer, parked the mower rig along the side fence, and went inside. My apartment was the same. The couch, the TV, the kitchen I didn't use, the walls with nothing on them. It smelled like dust and dryer sheets from the basement laundry. I dropped my bag by the door and put my keys on the counter. Stood in the middle of my living room and looked up at the ceiling. Everything was quiet. I showered and changed into clean clothes and made a cup of coffee with a machine that had been sitting idle for 2 days. The coffee was better than the gas station and worse than Marin's thermos from that first morning. I sat on the couch. It was dark outside now. The streetlight flickered through the window. And then I heard it. Footsteps. Soft and deliberate, directly above me. The same footsteps I'd been hearing through my ceiling for 2 years. The same rhythm, the same pace, the same gentle pressure of someone walking back and forth in a small room in the middle of the night. For 2 years that sound had been background noise. The sound of a stranger. The sound of someone I waved at in the hallway and didn't know. I sat on my couch and listened to her walk. And the sound wasn't background noise anymore. It was a person. A woman who spoke 4 languages and paced when she was stuck on a word and drank herbal tea from ceramic mugs and said okay to things that scared her. I got up. I walked to my front door. I opened it and stepped into the hallway, and the stairwell smelled like paint and old carpet and something faintly herbal drifting down from the 3rd floor. I went up the stairs and I knocked on her door. I didn't have a speech. I didn't have a plan. I had nothing in my hands and nothing figured out, and I was making no sense at all. She opened the door. She was holding a mug, same as the stairwell that first night, same ceramic, same steam, same expression that wasn't blank but still, like she'd been waiting for a sound she'd almost given up on hearing. She looked at me and I looked at her. "Hi," I said. "Hi," she said. And that was the beginning of it. Not a kiss, not a confession, not a grand gesture. 2 people standing in a doorway saying the smallest word in the English language, like it was the first time either of them had used it. I'd spent 18 months keeping my apartment empty, and my walls bare, and my life quiet enough that nothing could hurt me. And the whole time, the person I needed to talk to was 14 feet above my head, pacing in the dark, waiting for someone to knock. Loneliness isn't something that happens to you. It's a door you keep closed, because opening it means you might get wrecked again. And you might. That's the deal. You open the door, and you stand there with nothing in your hands and no guarantee that the person on the other side won't eventually ask you to leave on a Tuesday. But you knock anyway. Because the alternative is 2 more years of listening to footsteps through the ceiling and telling yourself you're fine. If you've ever had someone right there, close enough to hear through the walls, and you let the distance stay because it felt safer, you already know what I'm talking about. There are more stories like this one on the channel. I'll see you in the next one.